The colony under siege Dr. Lisa Neff carefully adjusted her scanner as she knelt beside a cluster of silver-leafed plants that seemed to shimmer in the morning light of Serenity Prime's twin suns. The Mylarian scientist had devoted her life to studying the unique flora of this peaceful world, and these particular specimens held promise for revolutionary medical treatments that could help her species overcome their genetic susceptibility to nerve disorders. Her delicate blue-green fingers moved with practiced precision as she collected samples, and her large violet eyes reflected the joy she felt when discovering something new about the natural world around her. The colony of Serenity Prime was home to nearly 8,000 Mylarians who had established their settlement 15 years ago, after their homeworld became overcrowded and resource depleted. The colonists were primarily researchers, teachers, and peaceful farmers who had never known conflict and viewed their new world as a paradise where they could live in harmony with nature while contributing to galactic knowledge through their scientific discoveries. Elder Corin Vell, the colony's chairman, often said that Serenity Prime represented everything beautiful about Mylarian culture and their commitment to learning and growth rather than conquest or material wealth. Young Zephyr, barely into adulthood by Mylarian standards, worked alongside Dr. Neff as a research assistant and marveled at every new discovery they made together. The enthusiastic youngster had never experienced anything more dangerous than a minor equipment malfunction, and viewed the galaxy as a vast library of knowledge waiting to be explored and understood. Zephyr's innocent curiosity and boundless energy reminded Dr. Neff why their work was so important and why the colony represented hope for their species' future among the stars. The peaceful morning routine was shattered when the colony's early warning sensors began screaming alerts that echoed across the settlement and sent Mylarians running from their homes and laboratories in confusion and terror. Dr. Neff looked up from her work to see 3 massive warships descending through the atmosphere like dark storms, bringing violence to their tranquil world. The vessels were scarred and brutal in appearance, with weapon ports clearly visible along their hulls and strange symbols painted in what looked like dried blood across their metal surfaces. Commander Vex Darrow stood on the bridge of his flagship, Soul Reaper, and smiled with cruel satisfaction as he surveyed the defenseless colony spread out below him like a gift waiting to be unwrapped. The notorious leader of the Crimson Tide Pirates had built his reputation on attacking peaceful settlements that could not defend themselves, and he specialized in taking valuable research data and selling colonists into slavery across the lawless Outer Rim territories. His crew of murderous criminals from a dozen different species had followed him for years, because he always delivered the easy profits that came from preying on the innocent and defenseless. The pirates had chosen Serenity Prime specifically because their intelligence networks had identified the colony's valuable medical research and the fact that Mylarians were prized as slaves due to their intelligence and docile nature. Darrow's tactical officer, a scarred creature called Jaktar, reported that the settlement had no military defenses beyond basic shields, and that the population consisted entirely of researchers and civilians who would offer no resistance to their assault. The pirate commander laughed as he gave orders to begin the attack, because he viewed this as nothing more than a simple harvesting operation. Dr. Neff grabbed Zephyr's arm and pulled the young assistant toward the emergency shelters that had been built beneath the colony's main research facility. Around them, other Mylarians were running in panic as the first energy blasts from the pirate ships began destroying buildings and infrastructure with casual cruelty that served no tactical purpose beyond spreading terror among the population. The scientist had never imagined that such violence could exist in the galaxy, and she struggled to understand why anyone would choose to harm peaceful people who had never threatened or wronged them. Elder Corin Vell reached the colony's communication center just as the pirates began their landing operations, and he knew that their only hope lay in sending a distress signal to any ship or station that might be monitoring emergency frequencies. His hands shook as he activated the quantum transmitter and began broadcasting their desperate plea for help to anyone in the galaxy who might hear their call and care enough to respond. The Elder's message was simple but filled with the terror and desperation of his people, as he explained that they were peaceful researchers under attack by pirates and begged for immediate assistance. The distress signal raced through hyperspace at faster than light speed and carried with it the colony's location, population details, and the fact that they were facing imminent destruction at the hands of ruthless criminals who showed no mercy. To innocent civilians, Corin Vell did not know if anyone would receive their message, or if any civilized species would be close enough to provide aid before the pirates completed their brutal work. Most galactic governments maintained patrol fleets that might respond to distress calls within several days or weeks, but the colony did not have that kind of time. Pirate landing craft began touching down throughout the settlement and disgorged teams of armed criminals who immediately began looting valuable equipment and rounding up colonists with the efficiency of predators who had perfected their hunting techniques over years of practice. Dr. Neth could hear the screams and weapons, fire echoing through the underground shelter where she and dozens of other Milarians huddled in terror, while trying to comfort frightened children who did not understand why their peaceful world had suddenly become a nightmare. Commander Darrow personally led one of the raiding teams and took particular pleasure in smashing delicate scientific instruments that represented years of careful research and discovery. The pirate leader understood that breaking the colonists' spirits was as important as stealing their possessions, because demoralized slaves were easier to control and less likely to cause problems during transportation to the slave markets. He ordered his crews to be especially ruthless in dealing with any Milarian who showed the slightest resistance, because he wanted the survivors to understand that complete submission was their only chance for survival. The colony's research databases contained decades of medical knowledge that would be worth millions of credits to the right buyers, and Darrow's technical specialists began the process of downloading everything while his combat team secured the settlement and prepared the colonists for transport. The pirate commander estimated that the entire operation would be completed within 6 hours, and that his fleet would be jumping to hyperspace with their valuable cargo long before any potential rescue force could arrive to challenge them. Dr. Neth held young Zephyr close as they listened to the sounds of their world being destroyed above them, and she whispered ancient Milarian prayers while hoping that somehow their desperate message had reached someone who possessed both the power and the compassion to help them. She did not know that at that very moment, her species' call for aid was being received by the one civilization in the galaxy that viewed protecting innocent life as the highest moral imperative, and would respond with a force that would shock every military analyst in known space. Asterisk. The human response Admiral Marcus Chon was reviewing strategic deployment reports in his office at Terra Defense Command when the automated alert system chimed with the distinctive tone that indicated an incoming distress signal from outside human space. The veteran officer had spent 35 years protecting Earth and her colonies and had learned to recognize the subtle differences between routine emergency calls and genuine cries for help from civilizations facing existential threats. As he read the message from Serenity Prime, his weathered face hardened with the cold anger that came from knowing that innocent people were suffering, while he possessed the power to help them. The Milarian colony's desperate plea contained details that triggered every protective instinct that humanity had developed during their long climb from a primitive death world to masters of advanced military technology. 8,000 peaceful researchers and their families were under attack by pirates who specialized in enslaving entire populations, and the colony had no defenses beyond basic shields that were already failing under the criminal assault. Admiral Chun had seen similar situations before and knew that every minute of delay meant more innocent lives lost to the cruelty of predators who viewed compassion as weakness. Within 30 seconds of receiving the distress call, Admiral Chun activated what humanity called the Guardian Protocol and sent priority alerts to every military vessel within 3-star systems, along with civilian ships that could provide humanitarian support. The Guardian Protocol was not merely a military response, but a sacred promise that humanity had made to the galaxy after witnessing too many civilizations destroyed by those who preyed upon the peaceful and defenseless. When humans heard a cry for help, they responded with overwhelming force because they understood that half measures often resulted in the very people they were trying to save becoming casualties of inadequate protection. Fleet Commander Elena Rodriguez was conducting training exercises aboard her flagship, Divine Retribution, when the Guardian Protocol alert reached her, and she immediately ceased all non-essential activities to focus on the rescue mission. Elena had earned her command by demonstrating the unique combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering moral courage that humanity demanded from those who would lead their forces into battle, and she felt the familiar surge of determination that came from knowing her skills would be used to protect innocent life rather than conquer territory or gain resources. The response was immediate and overwhelming as ship captains throughout human space acknowledged their orders and began plotting courses to the Mylarian colony at maximum possible speed. Captain Jake Morrison brought his assault cruiser Thunderstrike about from its patrol route near the Centauri system and pushed his engines beyond their rated specifications because he knew that pirates rarely showed mercy to civilians who had witnessed their crimes. The experienced officer had fought in 6 major conflicts and understood that the most compassionate response to evil was to meet it with such overwhelming force that surrender became the only rational option. Lieutenant Sarah Kim received the alert while her advanced reconnaissance ship Shadow Walker was conducting stealth operations near the Vega system, and she immediately volunteered to serve as the advanced scout for the rescue fleet. The young officer specialized in rapid deployment operations and had trained extensively in hostage rescue techniques because humanity had learned that the first ships to arrive at a crisis often determined whether a rescue mission would succeed or become a tragedy. Sarah's ship was equipped with the most advanced sensors and communication systems in the human fleet, and she could provide real-time intelligence about the situation while remaining undetected by enemy forces. Dr. Amanda Foster, the chief medical officer aboard the hospital ship Mercy's Dawn, began organizing trauma teams and emergency medical supplies. As soon as she received notification of the civilian casualties that were likely to result from the pirate attack, the dedicated physician had devoted her career to treating the victims of violence and understood that successful rescue operations required not only military precision, but also comprehensive medical and psychological support for traumatized survivors. Her teams had treated everything from combat wounds to the complex trauma that resulted from slavery and torture, and they were prepared to help the Mylarian colonists recover from whatever horrors they had endured. The scale and speed of humanity's response began registering on galactic monitoring stations as dozens of warships changed course simultaneously and began moving toward a single destination at velocities that strained at the limits of their faster-than-light drives. Intelligence analysts throughout known space attempted to determine what kind of threat could justify such a massive deployment of human military assets, and several governments placed their own forces on alert because they assumed that Earth was preparing for a major conflict that might affect the balance of power in their region of the galaxy. Admiral Chun coordinated the response from Terra Defense Command and watched with satisfaction as the largest rescue fleet in human history began forming around the core of Elena Rodriguez's task force. The assembled ships included not only frontline combat vessels, but also specialized medical ships, engineering vessels equipped to repair damaged infrastructure, and even civilian transports that had volunteered to carry supplies and provide temporary housing for displaced colonists. The admiral knew that other species measured military responses by the size of the threat they faced, but humans measured their responses by the value of what they were protecting. Communication. Intercepts from various alien governments revealed confusion and concern about humanity's mobilization as they struggled to understand why the Deathworlders would deploy such overwhelming force to rescue a small colony of unknown aliens. The hegemony's War Council went into emergency session and began calculating whether they could match human fleet strength in their sector, while the Galactic Council's diplomatic corps attempted to determine if this rescue operation was actually the opening move in some larger human expansion strategy that threatened the existing balance of power. Fleet Commander Rodriguez reviewed the tactical data as her ships prepared for the hyperspace jump to Serenity. Prime and she felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and cold anger that came before combat operations. The pirates who had attacked the Mylarian colony had made the fatal error of believing that peaceful civilizations had no protectors, and they were about to learn that humanity viewed attacks on innocent civilians as personal insults that demanded immediate and overwhelming response. Alana's combat experience had taught her that the most effective deterrent to future crimes was to ensure that criminals understood the inevitable consequences of preying upon the defenseless. Captain Morrison's crew worked with quiet efficiency as they prepared the Thunderstrike for combat operations, and the veteran spacers understood that this mission represented everything noble about human military tradition. They were not fighting to conquer territory or gain resources, but to protect people who could not protect themselves, and that knowledge gave them a sense of purpose that made them more dangerous than any weapon system. The ship's alien crew members, veterans of several campaigns with their human colleagues, had learned to respect the intense emotional response that drove humans to such extreme measures when innocent life was threatened. The human fleet began its jump to hyperspace in perfect coordination, and their formation was a masterpiece of military doctrine that had been refined through centuries of warfare and humanitarian operations. As the ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel, communication operators throughout the galaxy began reporting the movement to their governments and intelligence services while trying to understand why humanity was deploying enough firepower to challenge most planetary defense systems. To rescue 8,000 strangers they had never met, Dr. Foster completed her preparations for mass casualty treatment while her medical teams reviewed the physiological data on Mylarian anatomy that would be crucial for providing effective care to wounded colonists. The human approach to rescue operations was comprehensive and included not only removing people from immediate danger, but also providing whatever long-term support they needed to rebuild their lives and communities. Amanda knew that her work would continue long after the pirates were defeated, because the psychological trauma of violence often took longer to heal than physical wounds. Admiral Chun opened a communication channel to Fleet Commander Rodriguez. As her task force prepared to drop out of hyperspace at Serenity Prime, and his final orders were simple, but carried the weight of humanity's commitment to protecting innocent life throughout the galaxy. He told Elena that the Mylarian colonists were now under human protection, and that anything that threatened them was an enemy of Earth itself, and that the pirates who had started this conflict would learn why humans were called Deathworlders by every species that had witnessed their response to threats against civilian populations. The human fleet raced through hyperspace toward their destination, while carrying with them the hopes and determination of an entire species that had decided long ago that no innocent person should face the darkness alone, and that evil succeeded only when good people chose to do nothing in response to cries for help from those who could not protect themselves. Asterisk.